Alright, we are back with a new video, and today we are once again updating the power rankings for the Amazing Race 34 following episode 5. And honestly, the rankings didn't change too much from last week, as I feel like this leg only solidified my opinions of these teams even more, although there were some pretty interesting developments that happened over the course of the leg. But there are 9 teams to talk about, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the video. So starting off on number 9, we have the boot from this leg, and here we have Linton and Sharik. And it was a bit of a disappointment to see them go out here. I did think around the mega leg that they were probably being set up for a deeper run, despite my initial concerns coming into the season that as a father and daughter duo that they could be a bit more susceptible to arguing. However, I feel like with the Mega Leg and obviously with this past leg, I felt like we got a bit more of the arguing I was expecting from them preseason, particularly from Sharik, where I felt like Sharik was pretty annoying for a lot of the leg, particularly with her berating Linton for being so slow on the roadblock. But really, this leg was largely boring for them. They were pretty much second to last from the previous Mega Leg, and they were pretty much in the back of the pack the whole leg, never really like climbing above last place to where they were obviously eliminated here. And on the whole, I did find their run a bit disappointing, where despite having them like doing relatively well early on, like obviously once the Mega Leg hit, they really fell behind. And from that point on, it really felt like Sharik had given up, that her heart wasn't really in it as much. And obviously with the other teams like catching up and surpassing them, they weren't really able to catch up. So because of that, they're here at number 9. And with that, there are 8 teams left in the race to talk about. And as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely they are to win the race based on their current race ability. But number 8, and this is largely unsurprising, but here we have Aubrey and David. And sort of similar to what I thought of them last week, I felt like despite them having an okay finish at the end of the Mega Leg, I felt like a lot of that was given the specific tasks that they were given, particularly with the second roadblock, where a lot of that involved like them fixing a motorcycle, which I felt like really served them well, that allowed them to get so far ahead. And then in this leg, they didn't really have that. It was definitely a more reversion to the mean for them, where they were largely in the back of the pack, where despite them starting off in 6th place, they did gradually slide down to second to last, which isn't great. And really, a lot of the reason they were spared here is because of how far behind Linton and Sharik were. But really, I felt like coming out of this leg, my opinion of them has remained largely the same, where they are perpetually an underperforming team. And I feel like through that, they're pretty unlikely to win the race. But given the fact that other teams have been more susceptible to bigger collapses, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up scraping through a couple more legs. But realistically, I don't have that much confidence in them actually winning. And because of that, they are here at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7, and we're sort of sticking with the previous placements here, but here we have Glenda and Lumumba. And to their credit, I mean, the main reason I've had them at least somewhat in contention early on is due to their early success. But I feel like as the race goes on, they've really shown that despite them doing well early on, that they're not very good at playing behind, where they were obviously in second to last from a decent chunk of the leg. And it was really only during the detour that they somehow surpassed Aubrey and David. But even then, it was Aubrey and David. So they were able to squeak on by with a 7th place finish. But I feel like these last couple of legs have really highlighted that they're probably not that great of a team in the grand scheme of things compared to other teams. And I feel like as other teams have acclimated better to the race, I feel like they've pretty much fallen behind to those teams. So I feel like through that, they're an unlikely team to win, and because of that, they're here at number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6, and this is a team that I want to put higher, and certainly this team has had some highs along the way, and I feel like they still have some potential to squeak out a win. However, they're just too high variance for me to put them any higher. But here we have Quinton and Mattie, and I feel like their story throughout the race has been one of really high highs, but also really low lows, where despite them being capable of getting to the front of the pack, they all too often blow through leads on particular tasks. They get very easily caught up in certain things, whether it's certain tasks or getting lost. And we really saw that on this leg, where despite them doing okay at the roadblock, they really got outpaced to the detour, where they fell all the way to 7th place. And yes, they were able to do okay at the slide puzzle upon getting to the detour, but still the fact that they are prone to really big swings in their placement, that I can't have too much confidence in them right now. Though to be fair, of the teams in the bottom half of this ranking, I feel like they had the most potential to somehow pull off a win, as again, they are capable of making some incredible comebacks. but it's the fact that they are too high variance for me that leaves them here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and we have a team that did okay on this leg, and they didn't really do much to drag them down on the ranking, though I feel like other teams have shown more consistency and more impressive elements to their race that leads them down here. But here we have Abby and Will, and honestly, they weren't that bad on this leg. I mean, it's not great that they came out of this leg in 4th place, where they started off in 3rd place, so they did technically drop a placement, and they were a bit slow getting to the roadblock, though beyond that point, they did okay. They didn't do that exceptional at the roadblock, but again, they weren't able to drop too low, and they were able to squeeze through the detour relatively quickly. That allowed them to bump up to 4th place when they were previously in 5th place. So at least there's that, and I do feel like they're a team that's decently well built and definitely one that could make a deep run, though I feel like the other teams have more impressive elements to them that makes me more confident in those teams to win the race compared to Abby and Will. But I feel like just going on their pure performance, they're not the worst team in the world, but because of that, they're here at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and we have a pretty interesting team to talk about, as I feel like they have been getting more comfortable in the race, and I feel like this leg was in a continuation of that. But here we have Luis and Michelle, and to their credit, they won the leg. You know, like they obviously came in 4th place to start off, but then thanks to them doing really well at the detour, they were able to breeze through it and again be able to win the leg, which is pretty impressive. And I feel like through that, we are starting to see them as legitimate contenders. I feel like they were a team that, despite having a rocky start, have been finding their footing more, and I feel like now they're becoming more like the team that I thought of them in the preseason. So through that, I feel like they're probably going to be strong contenders moving forward. But with that said, I feel like they largely have not been as consistent as certain other teams, and also I feel like they haven't been as highlighted as much in the edit, where despite them doing okay in the edit, I had a lot of confidence in them doing well on the leg based on their talk at the beginning of the episode about how it was their time to shine. And to their credit, they could go up as the race goes on, and they continue to impress me. But I feel like compared to other teams, I feel like I am slightly more impressed by them. So because of that, I do have them here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and we have a team that I've been consistently impressed by over the course of the season. But while they had the variance of people like a Quinton and Mattie, I still feel like they're a team that can do relatively well. But here we have Derek and Claire, and they had a really impressive showing on this leg, where despite them coming in towards the back of the pack in 7th place, we saw them race to the detour after finishing the roadblock pretty quickly, where they were able to actually be the first team to reach the detour, which I found really impressive. And yes, while they do end up falling behind to Luis and Michelle, they're still able to come away with a 2nd place finish, which, considering the fact that they came into the leg in 7th place, I find that jump really impressive and really highlights their ability as a team to bounce back from really bad situations. But sort of similar to Quinton and Mattie, I feel like they are also a bit high variance of points. We definitely know that there are certain tasks that they'll just struggle at that will allow them to fall behind. But I feel like I have more evidence of them bouncing back from those bad situations compared to Quinton and Mattie that does lead them a bit higher. And I feel like they're a team that will continue to be strong moving forward. But I feel like the top 2 teams are probably more likely to actually win the race and have been somewhat more consistent, which is why I have them here at number 3. Now we're moving on to number 2, and it is the same top 2 I had last week, and largely for the same reasons. And realistically, had this team at number 2 done better on this leg, I probably would have had them at number 1. However, I did decide to lead them down largely due to their performance on this leg, but here we have Emily and Molly, and this was not a great leg for them, where despite them coming off in first, they consistently drop over the course of the leg, where they did okay at the roadblock, really holding their placement there, but obviously not doing great at the detour, falling behind to other teams, and eventually coming out in 5th place, which, considering that they started off in first, is not the greatest thing in the world, and that's obviously not boding well for them as a team in general. But the main reason I've had them this high so far is I feel like in the edit, they've been propped up the most. I feel like if we're going off Edgic, they're probably a bit more likely to win than the number 1 team. I feel like they have more of a storyline to justify a win than the number 1 team. And I feel like if they were to win, it would definitely be a more scrappy win than for certain other teams winning that we've already talked about. But I feel like the fact that the storyline is at least there for them to make a deep run and but possibly win, I feel like I had to at least have them this high simply due to that. But if we're going strictly off race performance, they have not impressed me the most. So because of that, they're here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the team that I believe is the most likely to win the Amazing Race 34 right now is still Marcus and Michael. Now, despite them doing okay on this leg, they did come away with a 3rd place finish. I actually did consider dropping them even with that finish, particularly with what we saw in the detour where they did take the more physical option versus doing the puzzle. And yes, while they did okay at the detour to where they still managed to come out okay, it still is a bit of a red flag in that it could open the door for them to be like falling behind later on if they struggle a lot with mental tasks. The fact that they're leaning so much into their physicality that they would choose the more physical detour, the one that is viewed in the edit as the worst option compared to the slide puzzle, the one that most of the top teams ended up picking, is a bit of a concern for me. And I do feel like this is more reminiscent of Ryan and Dusty from last season, like a team that did very well for most of the race and one that really impressed at certain points, but also a team that is prone to picking the wrong detours. And with them being seemingly more physical in their skill set compared to the mental side of things, it did lead to them making some bad decisions that caused them to fall behind. And with their decision here, while it didn't backfire in this case, it still makes me a bit worried that they could end up in a similar situation moving forward, where we could see them having this really big collapse and really struggle in some of these more mental detours later on in the race. So I feel like that alone made me question whether they are the top team. And to be fair, they still could end up in that spot by the end of the race. But I feel like with compared to other teams, they're still doing very consistently. Even with them choosing the bad detour, they still came out of okay. And they have been one of the more solid teams from a pure placement standpoint. They have the highest average placement right now in the race, which I can't really ignore at this point. And I feel like they've definitely demonstrated across multiple legs that they are a solid team. They are a team to contend with and a team that's probably going to make a deep run. So I feel like that alone is enough to have them this high. But mixing that with Emily and Molly just really not having the best leg in the world, I can't justify putting them below them for this week, but I could see that happening in the future. But with what we have right now, I did decide to leave them here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Now, obviously, I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so stay tuned for that. I'm also covering Survivor 43, which airs on the same night as The Amazing Race, so stay tuned for power rankings on those. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.